So I guess this is going to be part two. I didn't really plan on making this a part one or a part two type situation, but it's what ended up happening. I think the other video was a lot of filler, a lot of things that I pauses. If you noticed, I'm not a professional. I'm not a professional actor. I'm not acting when I do any of this stuff. It's just and it went on for 30 minutes, so I'm having to upload it now. Me and Ashley weren't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and I wasn't. She wasn't. Um, we together weren't. We both had different degrees of bad backgrounds. We didn't have the best, I guess, the best role models growing up, and that certainly factored into things later on. Let me get my ugly mug in the shot here. So, we got together. Things went very quick, and I went from not we went from not knowing each other at all in October of 2003 to being married and her being a military wife and being pregnant and having a baby and a bunch of other things in the course of a year. And that's a pretty dramatic, quick thing for any couple to go through. And then, um, later on, things happened. Um, I did I did some things that I'm not proud of, and um, I did have affairs on my wife. I did step out of our marriage, and that is not something that I can ever take back. Uh, as often or as much as I'd like to do that, it's a choice that I made, and it's something that I have to live with. Um, I I feel like the reason that some of that happened, there was a time where she was sick and she had a procedure. Her and my grandma didn't get along, and so as part of that, they had an argument, and Ashley left with the baby, and I took that as her leaving me, and she took the baby with her. I didn't, and I believed her. I accept that her version of the reasons that she left were the reasons that they really were, but I saw it as her leaving me, and it was her leaving a situation that she couldn't deal with. She was gonna do something that she would regret later on, to someone that cared about her, but had, I guess, different ways of showing that. Um, so I remember being at work and her calling me and saying I'm at my mom's, and that was a usual thing for her to do. Was to go to her mom's and do laundry or hang out or whatever. And I thought that was what that was. I was kind of the person that didn't know, I guess. And I said, okay, that's fine. When are you coming back? And she said, I'm not. So um, we said, very early on in our relationship, uh, she said that she wouldn't leave me unless I got violent with her, or I, my dad was an alcoholic. She knew that. Um, Unless I started drinking a whole lot, or if I cheated on her. So I never drank to excess. Um, I never pushed her or hit her. Um, but I did cheat on her, and I don't know that she necessarily found out about that. There was some thought or some allegation that she did, and that may have been the reason. But those were things that were said after the fact. I'd like to think that I knew her. We were married for 5 years and together for 6. I'd like to think that I knew her mind frame and knew. I mean, she was very much like a prosecutor, like most women are. She wasn't going to bring something up unless she had proof. And if she had proof, or she, was going to leave, then she would have done that. She would have brought that up. And that isn't to say that I'm a good adulterer. It's not. It's just that the things that happened later on that she didn't. I'd like to think that she didn't die with the knowledge of the thought that I cheated on her, and I don't. It's not really a good thing either way. I understand that, but it did happen. I did do it, and I'm not proud of it and not happy about it. But try to pick up where things left off at before. So I had completed it was close to the completion of the paramedic class that I was in. The IV portion had already been taken, and already picked that up and was doing that in a clinical sense in the hospital, in the emergency room. The notion for me to give her IVs initially was just fluids. Part of Crohn's disease is that you have a vomiting and diarrhea and nausea and those kinds of things. And those are things that you lose fluid for. I was an EMT. I was in a paramedic class. I thought, I'll just give her fluids. It'll replenish that, and that'll help. That'll fix things. It'll make it better. And at first, it was just that, and it was just the fluids. And then at some point, that progressed later on in 2008. That progressed to introducing pain medications that she was prescribed into her IV that I had established. I'm the son of a drug addict. My mom was a drug addict for many years, and I was around that stuff, but I never did any drugs at all. I've smoked marijuana a couple times, and that was it when I was 12, I think. That's my addiction or drug history. And it's because of the things that I saw when I was a kid that I didn't really have an interest in drugs. Didn't have an interest in doing them, didn't have an interest in trying different ones, and didn't have an interest in getting involved in any of that. So, so IVs had become something that we were both comfortable with doing or starting, and that was a big mistake, and that was complacency, and that was ignorance, frankly. So, I'd started IVs on her and had given her fluids, and then it progressed to the medications, because the pain that she had from what I believed to be the flare-ups from the Crohn's disease were pretty severe. It was enough that when she was in the hospital, they would give her a lot stronger drugs than anything that she was getting at home. The way that I saw it is that it was more of a stopgap or a temporary thing until we could get to a doctor or a hospital that really cared and that could deal with the underlying issues that were the Crohn's disease. And anything else was just going to be temporary and just to deal with the pain associated with that. So I began taking IV supplies and equipment, and this included, IV start sets and tubings and fluid bags and Tegaderm dressings and all kinds of other supplies associated with that. The service that I worked at, it was a private ambulance service. It was a company. So it wasn't a fire-based service. It wasn't a municipal service. It wasn't anything like that. They didn't provide you with the equipment they provided you with the state mandated equipment to operate as an ambulance and operate as a paramedic on an ambulance if when you got to that point. But a lot of paramedics have their own bags, and I think that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to get the supplies to have my own bag, to where if I was driving around, I could just stop and put a C-collar on someone if they were in an accident, or if they had an injury, I could put the right kind of dressing on there instead of going out and buying this stuff myself. And that changed to me getting enough stuff to have in my own personal bag, to where if the service didn't provide it, or if there was a shortage, or they ran out of something, then at least I could have the stuff that I needed to do the job that they, were going to pay me to do. Took a lot of other things that weren't related directly to the IVs. I took oxygen tanks and regulators. Those were all taken and seized. when everything happened. And there was a bunch of other equipment that was taken. It was all, I didn't have a stretcher in my house. I didn't have a suction unit in my house. I had things that were related that were in this bag. So this had been going on for several months, where I would give Ashley IVs. I'd start the IV, I'd give her fluid, and then we would take her prescription pain medicine, and it was in a pill form, and I would take that and crush that up and put that into the IV. I know a lot of things now about that. I didn't know those things then. I really thought that what I had figured out, or what I had done, or what I had started, what we had figured out, was something new, that no one was doing it, and that this was just it was the same thing as getting it in the hospital, and it wasn't at all. But she was prescribed different drugs, and take those pain medications, crush them up, and put them into the IV, either in a bag or into the IV itself that was wasn't set up to a bag or anything. So that conduct continued over a course of several months. In March of 2009, the night before, I'd worked. I remember we had went to we got a late run where we went from Louisville to Bowling Green with a patient, and she was texting me, I'm hurting, this is going on, when are you going to get home? She didn't want to take any kind of medication. She didn't want to do anything until I was either home or close to home. And that was because we had a 4-year-old daughter that was there at the house at the time, that, she didn't want to endanger her. She didn't want to have anything happen, her not be able to act and be the mother. Even if she was in pain, that wasn't the primary concern. The primary concern was our daughter. But I got maybe 30 minutes away from the house, and she had started an IV that day, and she had given herself some medication before I'd gotten home. I got home, she was laying down asleep, and I went and laid down. This next part's going to be kind of painful and kind of hard, but I need to do it, to talk about it. I woke up the next morning. This was March 26th of 2009, and it was around 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. I got up. Ashley was already awake, and so was our daughter. She was playing, and I got up and went to the bathroom, and I'd called into clinicals. The morning of the 26th, I was supposed to go to clinicals at the hospital, into the OB or the maternity ward, and do some clinical hours there. Ashley was sick, so I called in and asked to reschedule those hours. And they said, that's fine, you can come in and do them anytime, just give us a heads up and whatever. But so called in for that. I knew that I was scheduled off work that day, the 26th. It was a Thursday. So I got up, used the bathroom, and looked in the living room and saw Ashley sitting in the chair that we had gotten from a store not too long before that. And she was watching TV. She had some grimace, she was in a little bit of pain, it seemed like. So I asked how she was doing, talked, and she said that she was hurting, and that she asked if I could start an IV on her. So I tried multiple times to do that in different sites, and then finally was able to get an IV line that stayed and was stable. Got that started and got some fluid going, and then gave her some medication like we had done for the previous several months. That seemed to make a difference, and it helped. She was able to kind of calm down and not have uh, such a high pain amount at that point. So went throughout the day and gave her another dose of medication later on that day. Um, just after I'd given her this second dose, um, she something happened. I didn't recognize it. I didn't know what was going on. So she went, I guess, sort of unresponsive. Tried a few things to try to get her attention and to wake her up, and that was eventually successful. I asked her what happened, what was going on, and she didn't know, seemed out of it, didn't know what exactly had happened. We had a big argument and told her that I didn't want to do that anymore. I didn't feel comfortable with it. I didn't feel safe. You know, during all this time that this IV stuff was going on, there had never been any single bad event that had been associated with anything that I had done. And it's not to say that I thought that I was the end all of IV establishment. I didn't think that at all. But I hadn't seen the ill effects from what we were doing. So it's kind of hard to, and not that she was getting better, because she wasn't, but at least when she was sick, it wasn't totally debilitating. She had some other conditions during this time too. She had migraine headaches and she had kidney stones, on top of the Crohn's disease. Um, there was a procedure done less than a week before the 26th on the 18th that the only thing they were able to say, because of a bad implementation of the test they did, um, on their part, was that she had some kind of irritable bowel syndrome. So we're still operating under the premise that she had irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's disease, specifically Crohn's disease. So after this second incident, we had a big argument. I I went downstairs and to clear my head and to kind of calm down, because I was upset. I didn't want anything happening to her, and we were, you know, there were things that I did that, that the average husband shouldn't have to do, and shouldn't. I'm not gonna say shouldn't have to deal with, but shouldn't have to be in a position to do. And you have a relationship, and you have a marriage, and then you have things in that relationship that happen. Um, Ashley was sick, and I felt that I had a duty to try to make that better, however I had to. And that was what I felt like my job was to make her better. To if she was in pain, if she was hurting, to try to fix it if I could, to get her to doctors, to have insurance, to keep the job that I didn't like, to keep a job that kept me away for hours and hours. Um, I did those things because I cared about her, and because I wanted her to go back to school. After the baby was born, she said she was going to go back to school, and went back and forth, and she never did. Um, Life happened, and had a baby to raise, and so um, we had this big argument, and I said, I'll give you fluids. I don't have a problem with that, but the medication stops. I can't do this anymore. I can't risk something happening to you, and you getting hurt. So that's it. And there was some time had elapsed, and maybe an hour or so, and she asked me to give her one more dose of medication, and I agreed. And when I gave her that dose of medication, it was almost immediate. Um, she went unresponsive again. I looked up, and I saw that she didn't appear to be breathing to me. and I checked for a pulse. I didn't feel one. If I did, it was very, very faint. Um, so I pulled her out of the recliner, the chair that she was sitting in, and started kind of assessing and seeing if she was breathing, seeing if she had a pulse. I noticed that she didn't. I started CPR, and I called 911. It took 7 minutes and 36 seconds for them to get there. I had to go downstairs to let them in because our building was several apartments inside of one building. So you had to go downstairs to let them in, and they came upstairs. During the time that all this was going on, when I pulled her down on the floor, I remember looking down at the IV site that I'd started, and I took the IV and I threw it. I just threw it across the room because at that point, at that minute, I was mad at that IV. I was mad at myself. I was mad at the situation. I was mad at what was going on because I recognized it. I knew that it was serious, but I was mad at that IV, and I don't know, I threw it. Police and fire and EMS showed up and transported her to the hospital, where they tried to resuscitate her, and that wasn't successful, and she was pronounced dead about an hour after getting in the hospital. From there, several chains of events happened, and I'll talk about those, but I was in a state of shock as to what was going on. Before the hospital, the doctors had pronounced her dead. I called her parents to let them know that they need to get to the hospital. Didn't tell them why, because I didn't want them knowing how bad it was driving from where they were going to be driving from and having an accident. At some point, me and my grandma and my mom went back to the apartment, was met by the police, surrendered certain items and let them do stuff that they needed to do as far as pictures or collect information, evidence, whatever, and grabbed some stuff for me and my daughter and went to my grandma's house in Indiana and stayed the night there. It was supposed to be just stay the night kind of a thing. I didn't really believe that what had just happened had happened, and planned on returning and trying to figure something out. I guess it didn't happen that way, but I woke up the next morning, and it felt like that the previous day was a dream. And I remember waking up and being surrounded by people and realizing that I was on a couch and I wasn't at my house, and me and Ashley weren't in the same bed together. And then I saw what was missing and what wasn't there and where I wasn't at. and it was like a car crash or something. That it didn't really sink in until the next day, and that was the case. That was what happened. Um, at that point, I began to realize that what had happened, and what that was going to mean, and a bunch of other things happened after that. Um, I remember calling into the private service that I worked for and pretty much telling them that I wouldn't be back. I didn't want to work anymore. I couldn't work anymore. um, had had to start getting ready for a funeral, and that was a very difficult process for me and for her family, for a lot of people, her friends, people that knew her in school. Um, had the funeral about a week later, and that was, I don't know, I remember driving around near the funeral home before the funeral actually was to start, and I called her mom and said, I don't want to come there. I, I don't want to show up. I don't want to be there. I, so I was thinking, if I didn't show up and it wasn't real, I didn't have to accept it. Um, so I went and showed up, went and um, I don't know. I made a lot of mistakes, and that was the single biggest mistake I've ever made in my entire life. I was talking to my girlfriend about it tonight. I miss Ashley every day. I think about her every day. I think about our daughter every day. There's times that I go for weeks or months and not cry. And this is 2020. This was 11 years ago, but it, it, it I think about her every day. But there's times that I go extended periods of time and don't let the thoughts become so bad. And there's times like 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, I sit here and I made a list of videos and I watched them, and they're all videos that are very personal. And they're very emotionally intensive. Whether they're videos that she liked, we both liked, songs that were popular during that time, um, videos or songs that remind me of her and our life together. It and when I watch those or think about those, it could be, smelling a certain smell that she wore, um, Dolce & Gabbana light blue. When I smell that anywhere, and I can smell it a mile away, that's a perfume, one of the perfumes that she wore. When I smell it, it instantly brings me back and draws me back to those times when she was around and we were together. Um, it's there's still things I take from that experience, and I am learning about the situation that happened and the loss and what happened. There's things that I'm still learning about 11 years later. I'm probably going to continue to learn about it and experience those things. And people say that time heals all wounds or something to that effect. It doesn't. It doesn't. I can only imagine what her parents have feel, and they do not like me at all. Um, in a small world, everything is small, but they blame me, justifiably so, for what happened. I feel like it was my responsibility. I feel like it was my job to protect her and to not anything happen to her. And I brought the thing in to the house that would not protect her. And that was my choice and my mistake and my screw up. And I'm profoundly sorry for that. And I can't undo it. I can't go back. The only thing I can do is talk to people and try to do what I'm doing now. And if anyone sees this video or sees the presentation or hears me talk or sees the pictures or the videos of our daughter or us together, I like to think that would impress upon that person or those people that would see it what the gravity of the situation is. And that's how I feel. There's people that I know that I knew back then, that knew me back then, and that I knew back then, and we know each other still. We talk to each other still. I'm not the same as I was, and they're not the same as they were then, because time does change people. But so those were the events that happened, and fast forwarding about 6 months, I was arrested for several charges, and then through the course of a plea bargain that I agreed to with the state and with the other parties that were involved, I pled guilty to 4 charges, 4 felonies, and was sentenced to 12 years in prison. I pled guilty to those specific charges because they were accurate as to what actually occurred. The prosecutor, as happens a lot of times, prosecutor overstated the events and overcharged to try to secure a conviction, and that was the reasoning. But what I pled guilty to, I accept. I can accept it, and it's accurate and it fits. However bad it may be, it's not overblowing it. It's not more than it was. I didn't see that what I was doing or would do would cause the action that it caused. I did steal equipment and supplies, and drugs. They were not narcotics, but they were drugs. And I did things that I should have only been able to do on an ambulance, on the clock, while working versus at home. So from there, the journey, I guess, started to go to prison, and that was that. But I don't believe in a hereafter or any of that kind of stuff. I wish I did. It'd be easier, but I don't. But I know that I know that I loved Ashley, and I still do. And the amount of pain that I've caused because of my actions and my choices and my thoughts can never be measured or fixed or atoned for enough. And I hope that what I'm doing now and what I will continue to do will help with that and make that somewhat better for what it's worth and what can be done. So, thank you.